So Father Joseph. Yes, this is a public meeting, public discussion forum, which is part of the 8th International Bioethics, Multiculturalism and Religion Workshop and Symposium. And as a traditional part of our workshop, we have a portion of time allotted for outreaching to the public. And we have some representatives of the public who have attended, have come to attend this workshop. The topic is environmental protection, religious perspectives. So I will give the floor to Father Joseph Tam to lead the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Father Joseph Tam. I'm from Hong Kong originally, Chinese background, also Canadian, and then now I'm a priest, and I work in Rome and teaching bioethics. I'm with the UNESCO Chair in Bioethics and Human Rights. For those of you who don't know me, like we've been doing this for a few days now. So this is one of the session that we want to share with what we've been discussing in the last few days, so that you have an idea what we do. We've been doing this for the last 12 years. So we started in 2009 to have this kind of forum of discussion amongst different religions and religious groups, and to see what can we do among ourselves, and what is the scope of what we're doing. So we've been discussing about that, even like why are we getting together and why are we talking to each other. In itself is not something so simple. I think one of the things that we talked about before is the idea that we could find some common ground or some convergence. And then realize that at the very beginning that this is actually quite ambitious. In the end, we actually more or less said that maybe that is something in the future. But first of all, you need to understand each other better, to understand what do each tradition or religion has to say about a certain topic in bioethics. This is what we're trying to do, to kind of explain to you what we've been doing and then what we're going to be doing in these few days here in Bangkok. So we've had encounters already in Jerusalem, in Rome, in Hong Kong, in United States, Houston. We've encountered also in Mexico City, also in Morocco, Casablanca. So this would be kind of like the Buddhist country, and then we're missing India, or the Hindu religion. So basically, among the panelists, these are all speakers in our workshop in these 3 days. So we have Vadit from, I don't know where you're from Montreal, I know now. And she would speak from a more non-religious or secular perspective. She was the president. I think you're still the president of the vice president of the International Association of Bioethics. And then David is from Jerusalem, and he teaches at the Hebrew University, and he's going to speak from the Jewish perspective. Now you have Lucita from the what's the name of the
Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental
Okay,
Science.
that's right, from based in the UK. Right.
Sorry, I'll say that again. The Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences, based in UK.
Right. And then you have Chris Durante from the Big Apple, Manhattan, and he's going to speak from the Christian Orthodox position. And then you have Franil, that is from Thailand, and he's going to give us some ideas about this, the Buddhist perspective on these issues. So the main topic of this encounter that we've had is on the environment, based on one of the numbers of a very important document called the UNESCO Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. This is a international document approved by UNESCO, and the countries that sign onto that is basically most countries in the world. So in one of the articles talks about protecting the environment, the biosphere, and the biodiversity. So based on this number, we have been discussing what that means for each different religious tradition as well. And we've been having some kind of discussions. And then some of you have been also participating in these discussions. Hopefully you won't get bored because it's kind of a little bit repetitive. But for the sake of the audience, we try to kind of make it less academic and more conversational as well. So, I mean, I prepared some questions. The questions are not the end in themselves. They're just supposed to provoke discussion, and so that we can get the conversation going. First of all, I think I would ask the questions, and any of you, if you have any questions or doubts, you can raise your hands, and we try to maybe go deeper into those questions as well. Okay, so the first question actually is directed to Vadit. Some of you might not know what bioethics is, and so Vadit, what is bioethics, and how to explain what bioethics is to people who have never heard of it, and how is what we're doing now on ecology and environmental ethics related to bioethics?
Thank you for the excellent question and the opportunity. It's wonderful to be here. Bioethics is the field of study that explores the ethical, social, legal, policy, governance, even economic and political dimensions of biomedicine and biomedical research. So just based on this very long sentence, you understand that it's very rich, very diverse, and it uses different disciplines and different methodologies. You can find people who call themselves bioethicists, who were trained as in philosophy, sociology, anthropology, theology, medicine, genetics, fundamental research. People come to this field of study from many different directions, and they bring different types of expertise, methodological and conceptual. Bioethicists work with normative arguments. They just employ conceptual analysis. They can work with legal and policy comparative analysis, looking at how different countries and jurisdictions regulate these biotechnologies. And they work with empirical methods. We survey what the public thinks about new technologies, or we interview politicians about how they approach these technologies. Now to the second half of your question, we were just discussing at the workshop the fact that bioethics as a field was born in the 1950s and 1960s in response to research ethics scandals, such as the experiments on prisoners in concentration camps in the Holocaust. It was born to fight back against medical paternalism. For many centuries, doctors decided what was right for patients, and patients had no voice for themselves. So bioethics really was targeting the individual within the system. And today we're starting to step back from the individual, focus and see the individual within a community, within a population. We talk about public health ethics, especially now after the pandemic, and we talk more about justice issues, especially global justice. What regions that have more resources owe people and populations in regions of the world that have less access to health. When we look at climate change and the climate crisis, we know that there is and will be impact on human health and on the health of populations. We're already seeing it as the temperature rises, as certain parts of the planet become inhabitable, people will start suffering from different kinds of diseases. There will be big waves of migration. issues of access to healthcare, bioethics will address the issues raised by the climate crisis that are related to human health and public health.
Like the pandemic, right? That's
Exactly.
one of the issues that we've been facing. Sorry. So it's like the pandemic, one of the issues we've been facing in the last 2 years. And how is that a bioethics topic?
Bioethics looks not just at the health of one individual, but at the health of communities. There's an entire part of bioethics that is called public health ethics. And that domain, that area of study, explores the tension between the rights of individuals to get the best healthcare, but also to just have their rights respected.
Like the vaccine, right?
The right to get the vaccine
right.
on one hand, and on the other hand, what we call the common good or the interests of the entire population. The best example, I think, is quarantine. Remember when we were all told to stay home? Nobody wanted to stay home. We wanted to go out. We were told we're not allowed to visit our grandparents. We were told we cannot accompany a loved one to the hospital, even if they were dying. These were terrible restrictions on our individual liberty. And we had to make sacrifices as individuals for the common good. Public health ethics looks at the tension between our interests as individuals and our interests as a society. And it's a domain that tries to find the right balance. How much are we expected to sacrifice for the common good? And at what point the common good has to be sacrificed because we should not give away our rights anymore. So the vaccine was a great example. Many governments would have wanted to force citizens to be vaccinated, but they didn't force it. They created a lot of difficulties for those who were unvaccinated, but it was still a choice. How to find that balance is exactly the work of public health ethics.
I see. So, for example, whether you should get vaccine, like whether the government has to impose you to have the vaccine or not, is a bioethical question that everyone has to decide, or the government has to decide, or the bioethicists would have to deliberate as to what is most ethical and what is not.
Exactly. What was fascinating about the pandemic was that many governments came to us, the bioethicists, and asked for our advice, because those decisions were not just scientific, they were based on the values of every society. I'll give an example. I work in Quebec. Quebec decided not to close schools because the feeling was that the value of education and the well-being of children should be the top priority, but they put a curfew so nobody was allowed to leave the house after 8 p.m. So they decided to use a measure that touched everybody, but prioritize the children's interests. A Canadian province right next door closed the school, but did not use the curfew. So you see how sometimes public health is really based on the values and the priorities of a given society, of a local community. So a lot of governments came to us, the bioethicists, to help them think about what principles should guide these very complicated decisions.
Sorry. Here we have a panel of people from different religious traditions. And how do you think religion can interact with bioethics, and especially with environmental ethics, which is the topic we're dealing today? How can religion help or hinder this kind of discussion that Vadit just mentioned?
Well, I guess in general perceptions, we tend to separate between religion, science, bioethics, whatever it is. We are trying to individualize every field of study. I guess in real practice, that it doesn't work in that sense. In many ways, the way the bioethics talking about, the way environmental is talking about, the way one who is pro to the nature talking about, throughout our conference, throughout our workshop, it has been proved 100%, 1000% that every religion, every faith-based community, they are trying to say the same message, that the environment is in crisis, and it is our job as a human who are living in this environment to save the environment, to protect the environment, or take some measurement in one way or another. So one who is in the theistic religion group, the Abrahamic religion group, may kind of rationalize by the idea of the God-given, and for like Laudato Si says that care for creation, is not only the creation, but it is our duty to care for creations and so on. But in the religion, we doesn't have a God as the supreme being, like a Buddhism and so many other faith groups, or even atheistic. They will try to see is we are endangering the nature, and the nature itself. Without the nature, without a pristine nature, without a pristine environment, our life will be not a well-being. So it is our job, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to look after the nature, which we are getting a lot from that. And most important thing is that we have to leave things for our future generation. So we are not only the selfish, become looking after all. So that's why when we talk about religion, it is another science. We are trying to speak on the crisis, on what is going on at the moment. From the scientific science, scientific knowledge, they are saying the one thing. And from the other anthropological, I'm an anthropologist, I'm saying another things. But from the religious point, we are saying one other things. But to what? To have this equilibrium between how we can live in society peacefully and doesn't really endanger the nature, which is our source of our living. And that's why I think that is religion is related in that sense.
Also, I guess a lot of people in this world are somehow tied to some kind of religious tradition. And many of these bioethical decisions or dilemma are usually presented as religious questions too. So they might come to you and ask you those kind of questions, like, should I get a vaccine? Should I quarantine? What is it that I should do? Because they don't understand bioethics as an abstract thing, but as something very real and touches their lives and their families, right? So did you have that experience with the vaccine or the COVID?
Yes, of course. We are in this era, and we are in the, I don't know, it is a good era, a bad era. We have to go through all this, especially with the vaccine. And then we can see that it is a government measure trying to impose on these people for the safety of the all the common good. But at the same time, there are also a lot of debate whether the vaccine is really working the way we really want it, or it is, we are really throwing some of the byproducts, some of the negative in impact, which we don't know yet. In the future, sometime, I don't know what is going to happen after this, we have taken the vaccine. And even the vaccine, in some of the people who are very, very, in a way that panic with the COVID, I have seen someone who is taken at 6 shots, 7 shots of the vaccines. And then I said that, well, is that really necessary? So if those kind of people come to ask me, I would say that there's one very simple idea of the Buddhism. It says that there is 2 teachings which Buddha taught that which can protect the whole world. Okay, the 2 teaching is that in Pali called Hiri and is called Ottappa. And that is Hiri is that the first thing is that you have to responsible of yourself, take care of yourself, as well as in the cause of others. So you have to take care of others as well. So if you have balancing that, whether you will take vaccine or not, how many doses you take it depends on you. But if that kind of activity creating imbalance with others, imbalance in society, you have to think hard. You can think yourself, become so selfish. And then even instead of taking the 6 doses of yourself, why don't you give some dose for someone who is unfortunate and never got it? So this kind of thing, I think this is the whole idea is that how we do it. Like I myself, I just took 2. And then I refused to take mRNA because the doctor everywhere where I go, and they are trying to impose me to take mRNA. And then I always make a fun that mRNA in Thailand will be Marana. M is Marana, and in Thai, in Pali, Marana means death. So I just make a pun that I don't want to die yet. So that is my choice. But if not taking that vaccine, it's really creating a problem for the society, then I have to reconsider myself, and even that one I have to take it. Thank you.
So, Lucita, I know you are familiar, especially expert in the Islamic perspective on the environment questions. I wonder, as Pranil was saying, in Buddhism, there's they don't have the concept of God as the main reason why you behave in a certain way, but according to you, how does that differ from the Islamic position? Would you consider it somewhat like theocentric? I mean, based on the existence of God and doing God's will? Or can you explain a bit more on that? Yes.
Yeah. So Islam is based on the Quran, which Muslims believe is the revealed words of God, and also upon the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, who Muslims regard as the last prophet sent to human beings to teach them about the way of God, the right way to live, the best way to live, which is we call a deen. And the Sunnah is the name we give to that example of the way to live. And he gave teachings through his example, and also by what he commanded and what he forbade and what he allowed. So those were his teachings. So teachings and example are called the Sunnah. So from these we get, I think, yes, a theocentric view of nature, that it is all a reflection of God, because everything that God created reflects some aspect of his nature. We call his nature is described in Islam through the 99 names, which are the characteristics of God, the most loving, the most kind, the most generous, the one who's all-knowing, all-seeing, all-hearing, the one who has power over all things, who is all-encompassing. So those are the ways we know God. And we see nature from the Quranic perspective. We see that nature is full of signs, and we're told to look at the signs in ourselves and in all of nature by doing scientific research and reading and observing and reflecting, so that we may know more about God and be more grateful for everything he's given us, and be motivated to use nature in the best way, the most beneficial way, that will not just benefit us, but will benefit others too. So all in balance, with everybody's rights in balance, the rights of animals, the rights of other people in our community, the rights of the ecosystem. So everything has to be in balance. There's a balance of give and take, and a recognition and a respect for the pattern that God created in the ecosystems and in hydrology and in the way that he made everything. So rather than always trying to make everything a way of making money for ourselves, we should be looking at, why did God make the mountain like this? Why did he cover it in trees? Why did he make the rivers flow from the mountains to the sea? And what is the wisdom of God in this? And how can we work with ecosystems and not be against them? So I think that is, and nature therefore becomes a test of human beings' obedience to God. Are they going to use it in the best way that God taught us to treat it, within his limits? And are they going to do it with God consciousness, or are they going to rebel against his order, his natural order, and cause destruction through their disobedience and their ungratefulness and their greed? And what we try to cultivate in Islam is taqwa, which is God consciousness, which is being careful with everything we do, that we're trying to do it with consciousness of our accountability to God. And in a way, we were trying to do everything in a way which pleases God, every part of our life. It's not just worship. Worship to us is called ibadah, but it means serving God in everything we do. So there's and Islam is a whole way of life, like the Tao. It is a whole way of life, and there's guidance in Islam for everything we do, including economics, politics, management of communities, families,
Mhm.
everything.
So you would affirm that the Islamic position on environmental ethics is theocentric.
I think, no, in a way it's not. It depends what you mean by theocentric. Because theocentric can mean for the benefit of God, whereas we do not benefit God through our management of nature. We are not actually able to benefit him. He
Right.
owns the whole of nature. He will inherit it all after we're long gone. He
Right.
is eternal. But he tells us how to use nature for our benefit and for the benefit of everything, not just for
Right.
our benefit. Yeah, he teaches us through the Islamic guidance, through the guidance of all the
Right.
prophets, how to live in a way, the way, which is the most beneficial for
Mhm.
everything
Mhm.
in balance. And that I don't know whether you, what do you call that really?
Okay.
I mean, I
How
think
would you describe that? Would you call it?
ecosystem centric.
Okay, ecosystem centric.
I don't know.
Okay. Good. How about Chris? I know that a lot of people, at least in
Wait, before you finish, just so people know where I'm coming from. Just so you all know. Just so you all know, I'm an associate professor of theology at St. Peter's University in Jersey City, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. And I have a background as I'm an ethicist, comparative and a Christian ethicist. And my Christian background, as Father Tam said, is Orthodox Christianity, in particular the Greek Orthodox perspective. So
Right.
just so you know a
Right.
little more.
But he teaches in a Catholic university.
But I teach at a Catholic university and I studied comparative religion.
Right. So he's also an expert in Buddhism. So anyway, there's like, I mean, when you talk about ecology, especially in the, I guess, some literature or in the news, sometimes you hear this complaint that the problem that we're facing today is the fault of the Christians, right? That they were very self-centered. They exploit nature and they use it and then in excess. And then this is a problem that we're facing today. And Christianity is in part to blame because of the way they understand Christianity as being like anthropocentric. How would you respond to that? Is this true, or how much of that is true, and how much of that is not true?
Thank you for your wonderful and challenging question. Yeah, the famous 1967 Lynn White thesis that Christianity and the Judeo-Christian tradition caused the demise of the environment with its worldview. I would say that it's not so much Christians. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. It's not so much Christianity as it is human sinfulness, human viciousness, our vices. While people who identified as Christians and still people who identify as Christians do cause ecological harm, people from myriad traditions, whether they're religious or philosophical, also cause harm. And really, you mentioned one key word, and there's a couple others that are operative here. It's our self-centeredness. The Greek Orthodox perspective would say that our self-conceit and our pride couple together to create anthropocentrism in such a vociferous way that we only look at nature instrumentally. We don't see any other value in it as a storehouse for our own benefit. And within the Christian tradition that we share with other Christians, especially the Roman Catholic tradition, this idea that our viciousness is not just our self-centeredness, but our intemperance, right? We haven't used nature in a moderate way. We've been excessive in that sense, and our excessive use. It's not that we can never use nature. So I'd like to pull back and say that it's not so much Christianity's fault. Really, it's humans falling victim to their own viciousness. And we see this, you know, today. Christians are at times on the forefront, whether it's the Laudato Si movement, because of Pope Francis's work, or my own patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, dubbed the Green Patriarch. Since 1997, he coined the term ecological sin and has been promoting environmental awareness. And for us to not only protect and care for creation, but go beyond. My tradition teaches that the divine, to harm the face of the earth is to spit on the face of the divine. We're panentheists, so we actually see the divine in the divinely created order of this natural world. So I certainly wouldn't blame Christianity. And I think that when we look at even the world today, whether it's even a secular ideology like neoliberalism, right, that sees a forest as a storehouse of timber rather than as a living system, this organismic system, we mistake its value, and we don't see it holistically. So I would not place the blame on Christianity, but I would definitely implore Christians in my own tradition and others to rethink the anthropocentrism that blame gets put onto us, and say that, you know, really Christians are supposed to be more Christocentric, not anthropocentric, and for us that is you know, both living a life of virtue and imitation of the figure of the Christ, and also understanding that the Logos, this divine Logos, that is the way the divine is through the world, gives sanctity and a certain sacrality to the natural world, that we must care for it and value it immensely. So I don't want to take up too much time.
Talking about anthropocentrism, I know that Judaism also had this kind of shared value with the monotheistic religions. Would you consider, I mean, this is obviously a debate, what do you mean by anthropocentrism, and whether Judaism also has this tendency or not to a anthropocentric type of ecological ethics or not?
Thank you, Joseph. So I'm David, I'm a professor of philosophy, so my approach is more philosophical and abstract, and we go back now in the history of ancient, the most ancient monotheistic religion, which is Judaism. And Judaism is ambivalent about the question of humanity versus nature. And this ambivalence is already manifest in the first story of the creation of the world. And thus, unlike many other myths of the creation of the world, we have two stories running parallel, but in different directions, although not really contradictory. The first chapter of Genesis says that God created male and female, man and woman, and said to them to multiply and increase, be fruitful and multiply. But for that, they needed some environment, and they were given the world, what we call today nature, which would be the environment in which they are going to live. According to that story, God gives them nature, or the whole world, for their use. They can do whatever they wish, or whatever satisfies their needs, especially food and hunting and refuge, whatever. This is called the dominionist view, according to which human beings are the masters and conquerors and rulers of the world. By the way, I say world and not nature, because surprisingly, the word nature does not exist in biblical Hebrew. It's a modern, just 200 years ago, it was given its current sense as what we mean by nature in all other European languages. And so there's the world, the heavens and the earth. Now, that's the first story. The second story is that Adam is created alone. Woman comes next. They are not born together or created together. And God shows man his new environment, the Garden of Eden, and says, look how everything is so beautiful here. And your role, your task is to keep it, cultivate it, and tend it or keep it. So this is the tradition of not of conquering the land and ruling it and using it, but rather tending it, keeping it, guarding it, protecting it. So these two stories made in our modern philosophy of the environment a very nice career, because they focused on the debate between the ecocentrist, if you like, nature-centric, and the anthropocentric. Anthropocentric meaning that human beings are the sources of the center of the world, the source of value. In theological terms, they are the crown of creation. That's the telos. They are the purpose for which the whole world was created. And this debate is going on. My personal inclination, and I think it is in many respects still quite a major trend in the Jewish tradition, is more to the anthropocentric view. That does not mean that the world is not a value. The nature is not a value to be protected, but it is to be protected for the sake of the flourishing of human beings.
Okay, so that's the whole thing. Like, do we protect the environment because it's good for us?
Right.
Or do we protect the environment because we want to protect it because the environment has a value on its own,
right,
independent of us?
So I'll bring a nice metaphor, which I met a few years ago. There's an advertisement for a very prestigious watch. I don't know, it's a Cartier Philippe. Patek Philippe. They had an ingenious advertisement which still runs on, I think. You see a man with a watch and his boy, his son, in a loving relationship, and the advertiser says, the watch is not yours. It is. We don't own the watch. We just keep it for the next generation. So the watch is, that's one sense of being a guardian. You protect nature or the watch in order to deliver it intact to the next generation. The source of value is your son, is the next generation, is human beings. The other sense of guardianship is the legal one. When you go to court and the parents died or are not able to raise the child, they go to the court and the court nominates a guardian for the child. Now, that's a different sense of guardian. This is not in order to deliver something to someone who will appreciate it, but it's protecting the thing for its own sake. The source of value is the child, not the son who is going to own the watch. So these two cases, two senses of guardianship, I think are helpful in us thinking about the difference between anthropocentrism and nature,
Right.
ecocentrism,
Right.
that nature has, we have to protect it for its own sake, regardless of future generations, of the
Uh-huh.
very existence of
Right.
human beings.
What about the other religions? What would you say Islam would be leaning towards one or the other? Is it for the sake of God, the sake of humanity, or the sake in its own?
Okay, I think here I am leaning towards anthropocentrism
Uh,
because nature is of value, not just in itself, but because it does help to keep humanity going.
Okay.
So, and we are obviously going, I mean, the God does value human beings.
mhm.
He does honor them as, you know, and he prefers them, he gives them free will, and he gives them power over nature. They have an ability to make use of it.
Uh-huh.
That's what it means by subjecting everything to us. It means that we can make some use of it. Even the sun and the moon, we can use them to measure time. So there's a reason why nature is here. It is a lot to do with human beings. So,
Okay.
but there are other beings beside us who are called jinns.
Mhm.
That's what we're told in the Quran, and some people may experience them. And they also have free will. So they may also be tested through the creation as well to see how they use their free will. So
Okay.
that's the purpose of nature is it's like a test for both of us and our
Okay.
free will.
How about the Christianity? What would you say?
Well, I touched on this a little bit. Most Orthodox Christians, and I think all Christians, would say that they're Christocentric. The center is Christ, right?
But I mean, the question whether protection of environment is because it actually is good for humanity, or is it because it has value on
I
its
think
own?
it becomes both.
Okay,
But
both.
especially from the Greek Orthodox position, we believe that there's divine energies running through the natural cosmic order, including our planet. We also see planet Earth as a living organism, a single body. Saint Maximus the Confessor, who's also a doctor of the Roman Catholic Church, by the way, spoke about the earth as the makanthropos, the macroanthropos, the macro person, right? And we are like cells, and he didn't know about cells, but we are parts of this person. And that within us, we are a microcosmos, a microcosmo, right? And the microcosmos, he believed, even without scientific technology, that there are little worlds within us, so that we are a universe. And in this sense, both are imbued with divine energies. So we should protect nature for itself, but also in doing so, we're protecting ourselves, because we are part of this biospheric person, this biospheric organism. So for us, creation, the natural world, has intrinsic value, and it, you know, it has a sacredness and a sanctity. So our tradition is less anthropocentric than the Judeo-Islamic perspective that we just heard.
Even the Catholics.
Yeah,
I think even the Catholics tend to think that we protect the environment also because it's good for us, right? So we tend to not place so much emphasis that it has value on its own, independent of us, right? That's a crux of a question in some way. How about Buddhism?
Well, I guess the whole idea of Buddhism, when Buddha was awakened as enlightenment, is that through the two extremes. Now you are talking about two extremes here. You have to follow the middle path.
Okay.
And the middle part is what? Middle part is all about equilibrium. And whereas in terms of a human being, if you are trying to be and kind of a human anthrocentric, of course, it has a bad sort of a result on the negative side, in the nature side. So I would say that it's all about whether nature is there already, while it's already there. The nature become a problem with our existence. So what whole thing is about how we adjust ourselves to that bigger nature. As you said, is we are the part of nature, but this is a bigger nature. So we have to live with that bigger nature without any problem. So in a way that we have to adjust ourselves to that nature. And that is how, it's a not too extreme, just to take middle path and then balance it. And balance it could be not as a, in a one way that this today we balance in this way. So we have to be like this for the whole month. Doesn't matter. Because in the next morning, we might have another shift of balance. Maybe this is not my balance now, maybe here, maybe there. So it depends on what is going on. This is all about the cosmology, I say. This is all about the cause and effect of what is going on in the nature. Remember that we are the part of nature. So we can't be a owner of the nature. We can't be the boss of nature, but we have to respect each other and honor each other. That's how we can live peacefully. Otherwise, the nature will haunt us. That is all.
So in some way, the question, it's not easy, there's no easy answer. Like the question is there value in nature, right, of its own, or it is only valuable because there's humanity there, right? Because we're part of nature and that's what gives it value. But if there's no humanity, does nature has a value on its own? That's kind of like, obviously, who gives it value, right? Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, who is doing the valuing?
Right.
And, does nature value itself? Obviously, each organism values its own life. It tries to survive the best it can. But can an ecosystem consciously value itself?
Right.
So we are always the ones usually who are valuing it. But according to the Quran, God obviously values every part of nature and asks us to look after it with God consciousness, with the consciousness of our accountability, recognizing the rights of plants and animals, not taking more than we need, fasting, praying, trying to have self-restraint in everything we do. So in that respect, then if we do that, if we live in a way which is restrained and careful, we should not damage the ecosystem to the extent that it does not survive. That's something that we...
that's the question. Like, if we destroy it too much, it would destroy us. But then also it goes back to us. We're trying to protect the environment because we are trying to protect ourselves.
But for a long time, human beings didn't exist. So God created the earth. He had many creatures, dinosaurs, they all lived together without even thinking about us. And he still made it. So was that all just so that we can think about it and reflect on it? Or was it there for its own benefit? Maybe it was part of the evolution of the planet and the generation of oxygen and creation of an environment for us. Who knows? But it existed for millions of years without us. So
you want to say something, Fran?
Yes, I just want to say that we can just think of us. Us is matter because of them.
Right.
Without you, I'm not existent. Because if I'm here alone, I'm a speaker, and there's no one here around. There's only table. If I'm speaking as I am doing at the moment, do I am able to call I am a speaker? Yes, I am, but I have to go to the mental institute, which I can talk to the table, which can talk to all these things. So whole idea of I is another extreme. So that's why that I or us have to be balanced with others. That is a nature.
If I may, you brought up the idea of moderation, right? Moderate use and relationality. And I think that's key. On the one hand, even if there is a level of intrinsic value within the natural world, we can still use it. And hence we use it as an instrument. It can be both intrinsically and instrumentally valuable simultaneously. We don't have to say either or all the time. And I think that's an important thing. What we can be sure of is how we as humans value nature, the evaluative lens that we're looking through, right? So that to open it up and not answer solely as a theist, right? But allow non-theistic traditions and atheists to come together, we can always recognize there's multiple ways of valuing, be moderate, be prudent. The idea of phronesis, right? Being prudent in our decision-making, in our use, and realizing that yes, we are codependent with the natural world. So even if we're speaking from an anthropocentric point of view, it's self-defeating, right? And that's why I brought up the fact that we're part of the body of nature. You call it interdependent origination. And our theology is deeply relational. We take the idea of the Trinity very seriously, that is the model, like for the entirety of the natural world. All life emerges, all existence emerges through relationship. And there is differentiation and unity at the same time. That's the whole point of our understanding of the Trinity. It's not Santa Claus, a hippie, and a bird. It is a riddle, a mystery of distinct yet one in the many. And when we view nature and us together like that, right, I think we'll make more prudent decisions, even if we are making a particular anthropocentric decision at the time, maybe about our future generations.
Very short, I want to offer you a thought experiment, which I think could solve the problem where you stand on the question of intrinsic or anthropocentric approaches, value of nature. Let's assume that humanity comes to an end. This is not a wild assumption. It will happen probably sometime between 200,000 years in the future, or a little earlier, a little later. We won't exist here for all times, and there will be nature after us. I mean, the world as a whole will not be destroyed when we vanish. Now, think: what do you believe that nature, after the complete disappearance of humanity, will have value? Will have value? Do we, before we die, have to protect it, to do whatever we can to keep the Grand Canyon in the United States as beautiful as it is? For whom? For what? That's the anthropocentric view, and I think that's the major kind of thinking underlying the Jewish approach to what I call anthropocentrism. Anthropocentrism is not the unconstrained exploitation and the destruction of the wilderness or mining or whatever. It is a responsible way to deal with them, to engage, as the Buddhist monk says. But it doesn't give nature a value of its own, independently of what it does to us, yes, including its beauty, which only human beings can appreciate.
It reminds me of I'm not sure if a philosopher said something like, if in the forest where there's no one there, and a tree fell, right? Does it make sound? Does it make sound? It's kind of simple like that question, right? Does it make sound because there's no one to hear?
Values are exactly, in my view, like sounds. Someone has to hear or be affected by value. If no one is affected by value, it's like noise that no one hears.
But God is there.
God is something else. If God, yeah, sure. I'm taking that seriously. If God has an interest in the independent existence of nature without human beings, that's fair enough. That's going to remain a value.
Could I say something?
Yes.
Just give another scenario. Say we had to decide between human beings and nature. Say we had that decision. What would we do? If it could ever be a decision, because
one to exist or the other to exist.
You can't have one or the other in reality. But if you had a choice between letting a forest survive and it would be your children, which one would you choose? Would you choose the forest or would you choose your children? That is a very hard question for a human being. Yeah. Do you value the trees more or your children or your grandchildren? If it was the trees falling on your grandchildren, would you get rid of them quick and get them out of the way before they killed your children, or, you know, say it was lions and tigers. You'd go and kill the lion and tiger if they were attacking your grandchildren.
Right.
I want to push back on that example because like we're talking about with interrelationality, with the current climate crisis, I want to push back on two things. The current climate crisis, the point is that if you don't, work to the benefit of the environment, you will hurt your future generations, right? So that's why I want to push back on that example. And the idea of protection becomes problematic because protection is a particular act. In the Christian tradition, and we share this with other branches of Christianity, we call it creation care. And care is not only having custody over or protecting, but it's caring about. It's an ethics of care. And that's what I've been highlighting. It's always about whether it has value in and of itself. This is a fun philosophical question, but for environmental action that needs to be taken, we will recognize we're the ones wearing the lens of value. We're speaking to other humans, what they need to do, and they need to actually develop a care for creation. So it's not about whether we protect nature in point, case A, case B, case C, but if we have a sense of caring, right, then we can start acting more prudently and valuing nature correctly and seeing that we are a part of nature and that we don't always, it's not always about, the forest or my kids. It's they're together, right? Yeah.
It reminds me of another example, which is now they're deliberating because you know that malaria is caused by mosquitoes. And then now there's a technology with CRISPR gene drive that could take care of this. They could basically get rid of one species of malaria carrying mosquitoes. So are we assuming, I mean, it could be done, I mean, it's theoretically possible to annihilate a whole species of mosquitoes so that there would not be any more malaria. So it's kind of like similar example. Should we do it or not? And that's a big ethical question.
It is. And I think we would be wise to check all the consequences of eliminating a whole species before we even attempt it or
Right.
mess around with it at all, because it could be a key species in feeding some really important animal, which is vital for the whole ecosystem. And so you do not want to cause the collapse of an ecosystem.
You would say no.
I would say you have to be very careful.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to really know.
But I mean, a lot of people die, millions of
think
people
you
die of
probably-
malaria every year.
Yeah, I know. I think you should find
That's a good
solutions.
example.
But I don't think eliminating a whole species is the solution,
okay.
probably. But
Gene drives don't eliminate species, and I know Vardit can speak better to this, but a gene drive will alter the genetic makeup of those mosquitoes, right? So that they don't carry malaria.
Right.
But even in that case where we're not eliminating this species, right? So it no longer plays this niche in an ecosystem, which you're talking about. I think with any genetic modification that is so severe, especially if it's in the germline and it will be passed down, that we shouldn't take actions where we have severe risks of unknown nature. And the problem with using a gene drive on mosquitoes is we can't even at this stage calculate what those risks are or how severe they will be in future generations, especially as the climate is in the middle of a massive flux. So I think prudence there would have us step back. I think Vardit should speak though now.
So secular bioethics didn't get a chance to
Yes.
say what it thinks
Right.
about
Sorry.
anthropocentrism or ecocentrism. And obviously, it stands close to the Jewish perspective that David endorses, which is that everything bioethics does is not only for human survival, it's for human health, well-being, but also to promote human autonomy and agency and freedom. So I want to take the discussion in a slightly different direction, but it goes back to the wise words about equilibrium, balance, and prudence. So the example of vaccines came up earlier, and thank you for saying, why do I take 6 if other people didn't take even 1? And that was, of course, the big ethical to me, this was the greatest ethical challenge in the world, literally, that rich countries were giving their citizens a third vaccine when poor countries had zero and people were dying. And rich countries were hoarding vaccines instead of sending them and sharing them. That was a big failure of humanity in a time of crisis. So what that tells us is that when we talk about justice, especially global justice, we have to ask, what should we sacrifice, either as individuals? You know, I will not go to visit my dying grandfather in the hospital because I don't want to spread the virus. That's a huge sacrifice that I make. Or I will not get another booster because people in India didn't even get one. I sacrifice as a nation for the sake of another nation, okay? I think what the ecological crisis does to us is it takes this logic of how much should we sacrifice into a temporal dimension. So now we're talking about intergenerational justice, and we're asking ourselves, what are we supposed to sacrifice today for the sake of our grandchildren? And I hope no trees fall on them. But this becomes a serious, concrete, daily question. So I was invited to this workshop and I was very excited. I've never been to Thailand. I really wanted to meet my friends and have this interesting conversation and see Bangkok, but it meant flying for 20 hours and polluting the environment just to get here. Now, if I had been on Zoom, it would have been good for my grandchildren, and I would have missed a lovely opportunity to have fun, to have more fun. So how much am I supposed to sacrifice in my daily life for the sake of this equilibrium? That's the question of intergenerational justice. The second level of this question is, who makes this decision? In this case, I made the decision. I had the agency to choose to come here because I missed David and Father Joseph so much that I just had to come here. But there will come a point in the climate crisis where our governments will make this decision for us. And this point is already, we're starting to see it. Maybe just like in COVID, we closed the sky. We couldn't fly anymore. It was a new world. It was shocking. Maybe a time will come when we will permanently close the sky because the cost of our moving around the planet now will be too high for our grandchildren. So right now, we're still in the privileged position that we're making these sacrifices out of choice, individual choice. But if we continue to make bad choices, back to Chris's ecological sin, if we continue to sin because we're being egotistical, like me, we will get to the point that societies will create governance structures to force us to make these sacrifices, and things that maybe today seem inconceivable as limits to our liberty in 2 generations will be absolutely the norm. So this is a part of what we need to think about right now when we look for this balance of what we are sacrificing. Is if we don't make right choices now, our grandchildren won't even get to make these choices. They will be imposed upon them. And maybe that won't even save their grandchildren.
Well, I love what you just said. I do. I want to say that I think it shouldn't be seen as just egotistical to come here. Maybe some conferences, but as I was saying to Father Joseph, ours are very discussion based and back and forth, kind of like what we're doing now, but even more so because we read each other's papers and we've created a real sense of fellowship, unlike other conferences. Because we've been doing this so long, a number of the core members that we keep coming together. So if this was only on Zoom, the reason we've kept postponing is we couldn't do it, right? So part of the reason why I'm going to be presenting on Zoom in October at a conference, because it's a conference that's a normal conference. I came here because this is a different sort of venue. And on that level, yes, there's selfishness that I wanted to come to Thailand.
Just joking, obviously, about
no,
this.
but I think it's an important point.
But we're
right?
making a million choices like this one every day.
And I think, but that's why it's so. That's what I wanted to highlight, right? that, yeah, we do need to balance those decisions, right? And not just to say like our conference is great, our workshop is so special. That wasn't the point of it, but yeah, we are assessing these things, and to some extent, yeah, how much do we then take advantage of something? Because yes, I think flying will come to an end eventually, right? And how much do we take advantage of something now? Right? I consider myself a cosmopolitan and a multiculturalist. Oh my God, this is my last time to not only have fun, but experience Thailand, right? Come and immerse myself in a place. So it's, you know, and that could be selfish, but yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to what you were saying that I wanted to highlight there.
Can I
Yep.
say something? I think it's all about moderation, and I think not using fossil fuels is not the only solution to climate change. So and my belief is that ecosystems will provide us a lot of the solutions to climate change and even help mitigate it if we look after them and we regenerate them. So it's not just a matter of shrinking our usage of fossil fuels. So I believe that if we were restrained, we could just fly once or twice a year and not fly too many times. We kind of moderate it, then we'll probably be all right. That's my optimism.
Yes, I just want to, just what echoing here is all about human rights. So I'm just raising another voice. What about animal rights? What about this nature rights? And we are not taking care of those animal and nature. We are the sibling, our sibling. We are living with them, but there are a lot of species, a lot of plants, diversity, biodiversity is there, and we are never trying to look at this world from that perspective. We are trying to look from our only perspective. And that's why we have become egocentric. That's why we have become so selfish. In order to, in order to have our well-being, we are never regarding the other essential beings. I think that is what Buddhism is saying, that no, you have to look after yourself. Of course, that is your right. But at the same time, your right shouldn't cause someone's right. And that someone's right, it means all essential beings, all animals, as well as nature. So this is what, what we are, I think we miss out there.
Maybe you could open up to the audience, especially those who are not in a workshop, but I mean, also anyone who's also in the workshop, if you have any questions to one of the speakers. Someone has the microphone. Someone holding a microphone. Oh, you have they have the microphones. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can also come up here to the microphone. Yeah. All right. So that to direct to any one of these speakers or general. Okay.
Okay. First of all, good afternoon to all, and also I want to say thank you very much to Professor Suraj and Professor Frank, who invite all of us here. So my question is, actually we are discussing from the many religious perspective. So in my point of view, the religious is like our second level. So in the above the religious level, there's humanity. Already you're mentioning like a ecosystem and everything. So how much we can think about that side? So we're talking about religious side. So, and also the main cause of all the destruction we are suffering right now, COVID, and we can see everywhere so many problems. The main cause, what is the really main cause of all those problems? And one is, I think in my point of view, is ethical, the morality. So how much we can promote the morality, ethic in the education system? Because our future, we are talking about our future generation. So future generation means the kids who growing in the school, in the university. So how much we can reach to those level? So because in the, let's say for the Buddhist university school, they will teach the Buddhist ethic. In the Christian, they will teach Christian. In Muslim, they will teach the Islamic ethic. So how much we can reach all together? So through this way, we can bring the future worlds more harmonious. So because we are teaching our own ideology, our own philosophy, but through all, how much we can reach and to promote that value in the basic level, foundation, because they are the future generation, they are the future who will take care of this world. So how much we can reach that level from all of.
Okay, I think it's to any one of us,
Okay,
right? So
well,
Any one of-
I have
any
been
one of you.
involved in children's education about the environment to some extent. And I've also been to visit Indonesia, where they did have Pancasila, which is about unity in diversity. But they have many different religions. They have Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity. In Indonesia is a very big country with a huge population, many different islands. So they wanted to create unity between all the different peoples. So they came up with Pancasila. And I think there were many shared values between the religions. And I think and they did have state schools teaching Pancasila to the children to help them to all respect each other, respect nature. And I think that was a good way forward. And in England, what we do, which I really respect as well, that the government teaches every child in state school about the main religions and helps them to see their commonality and discuss ethical issues through the lens of different religions. So they would talk about abortion, or they talk about euthanasia, or they talk about the environment, or talk about the suffering in this life from the point of view of different religions. And I think that's really healthy. And I think denying the voice of religion and denying people or children any access to religion, like in France, is such a negative thing. And it causes such emptiness and lack of wisdom, I think. And I think that a lot of wisdom comes from the religions. And obviously there's common sense that everybody has, but a lot of wisdom from many generations comes through religions. And I think that we can learn a lot from them. And each religion has maybe slightly different focus, and each one has, you know, some wisdom to give us. So I think that is the way forward.
anyone else want to respond to the question? To this question.
Yeah, to his question on
Yes.
education, I think it needs to be integrated, and I think it needs to start young, but it shouldn't stop. And the problem with just like a religion class, I've taught comparative religion, then it's like this requirement, like even on the university level, like, okay, let me just get through my theology class or my religion class. Let me get back to, you know, my major. And even at the younger levels, if we compartmentalize environmental care, then it just becomes something to get through. We have to integrate it. And that's why I want to see the greening of our faith traditions. So it's taught through the religions after schools. It's integrated in science classes, care for the environment. Not all biologists are environmentalists, right? That care and concern for the ecological stability and health of the planet is in science, and particularly in business schools, because you know, the industrial model is destroying the world in a perpetual growth system, so that we need to change the economic models that we teach as well. And I'm thinking here of Herman Daly, and ecological economics needs to be integrated into our business schools. And so on all levels, it can't just be a compartmentalized little class, because then people will stop paying attention. We need to find ways in which it truly will become an integral ecological perspective, and we integrate this throughout the education system on all levels and in all subjects.
Yes, the religious education is very important, but we have to be very, very mindful with that as well, because when we're talking about religious education, it is sometimes trying to narrow down to the one culture, particular spirituality. And in that sense, in this 21st century, we are a globalized world. We have to make sense in terms of a global responsibility as a global citizen as well. But if it's just a one religion, particular one religion, the child which grow up with kind of a very myopic kind of idea of religion, wouldn't able to accept other religions, wouldn't be accept to harmonize with our religion. So in a way that even a religious teaching, we have to make sense that what is religion basically means. For example, in Buddhism, we call dharma. But what is dharma from etymological point of view? As this morning you said, a dharma means that a natural law. So if you are teaching a natural law, now we are teaching something above the humanity. It is not only the human kind of a requirement, but we are teaching something that which is beyond the human level, and then which encompass every kind and every species and every faith-based community as well. So this is one of the very important issue in terms of religious education these days, because we are not kind of a pocket like in old days. We are now globalized. We have to make sure that our children, future generation, has a wider way of thinking, look at other religion as their friends, not as an enemy. Otherwise, religion is sometimes make it not only binding, but binding together in a sense that are fighting with each other. So that is another very important thing in this 21st century we have to think, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say you need to unite against the common enemy. The common enemy is the destruction of ecosystems and the forces that cause that destruction. So, religious communities and all communities can unite on that. And most people would agree on that, I think, because that's their survival is at stake, And I was also going to add that in children's education, one of the most important things is that they have contact with nature and that they develop a love of nature and an understanding of nature. So in my work, I've been teaching that through the scouting movement as a scout leader, and also through forest schools, which is a good initiative in England, where they get children outdoors and do as much of their education outdoors as possible. Some normal primary schools are now training their teachers in forest schooling, and I think that's a very positive thing. So they learn to be adventurous outdoors, they learn to cope with different kinds of weather, they learn to name the trees, the plants, they learn how to survival skills, learn how to make fire, how to plant trees, lots of things. So the kind of things which they would have learned if they grew up on a farm or they grew up in the countryside, which a lot of city kids do not have access to. And now they're realizing this is essential that our next generations know these things and they understand nature. If they don't have any connection to it, how can they value it? How can they love it? How can they look after it? So it's really important that they have that access. That's what I've tried to focus on.
I think I have a point of view that will carry this to another level and be consistent with some of the things that have just been said. I'd like to borrow for this purpose the voice of Gary Snyder, an American Buddhist poet, and in particular a paper of his that occurred in Best Buddhist Writing, an annual produced by Shambhala once a year. It's called Writers Against the War of Nature. So instead of thinking, as we started off with, the idea that, where is the seat of intrinsic value, humans or nature? I think we might see humans within nature and problematize that binary and start thinking that we are part of a flow. We are a part of a process of what is. And if we start thinking that way, some of the antagonistic rhetoric of, man versus nature, the old theme, right, will disappear. And then we start thinking, how can we, and Snyder did this from his perspective in the Northeast of the United States, where he grew up among loggers and fishermen, and he saw the damage at firsthand. How can we think with nature? And if we start doing that, thinking like a mountain, as Leopold might say, but thinking like a mountain instead of thinking only as an isolated human being with our precious intrinsic value, I think we can put the question marks a little deeper down. How do we do that? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say that's teaching empathy.
Yeah.
How do you teach empathy? And I had a good exercise that was part of a permaculture course that I went on recently online. And for it, each person had to imagine they were a particular creature, imagine how they would feel, how they would see, how they would be experiencing the world, and what would make them most happy as that creature. And then they had to imagine seeing their habitat destroyed and how they would feel. And just the exercise of really trying to put yourself in the body of an animal, of any creature, or even a tree or whatever. Just the exercise is a very good one for empathizing with the ecosystem and really seeing from the view of it. Yeah.
I'm suspicious of this very effort, I must say. I think it's hopeless. The most we can achieve by trying to think like an animal is imposing our own emotions, concepts, words on animals without any evidence. I mean, we can imagine, I mean, metaphorically, what it would mean for an animal to report about its needs and aspirations and loves, etc. But I don't think there's anything to it in the sense that they're not conscious beings. They're not like us. They're not verbal. They don't have language. They can feel pain, but they cannot express verbally or conceptualize or evaluate their pain or happiness or suffering.
I'm sorry, they can. Dolphins can, almost all primates can, high levels of cognition. They have consciousness. There's sentience throughout the animal world, especially mammals. We see that birds are highly intelligent. David, I got to send you some documentaries. No, really. And I don't think it's just imagining like a cartoon, like a Disney cartoon, but learning, right, through the study of science, right? Science engaged ethical thought, learning through the study of science, right? Not what like me as a chipmunk, right? Like Alvin and the Chipmunks or something, but really learning and trying to understand what it's like for a dolphin to inhabit a habitat. I was just out engaging in marine biology and ecological training, and part of creating a dolphin sanctuary, and I was involved with that team, is trying to understand what is a good sanctuary for a dolphin, not through our imagination, but through really engaging in deep studies of dolphin cognition, the way in which certain types of pods interact, how they communicate, and how different species of dolphins have tension. I mean, the team really, yeah, sorry.
Okay, Chris, let's not discuss the borderline cases because I think gentleman was referring to entities in nature in general, or all kinds of animals, or maybe plants. And there, I must say, I lose completely the line.
Trees communicate. Suzanne Simard, Canadian forestry, a few others. Even Mother Tree is her latest book. Trees communicate, and a mother tree will send to her saplings, as well as saplings from another species of tree, nutrients if that sapling loses its mother. The studies of consciousness in the ecological world, the cutting edge science is showing us that our presumptions, and this is part of our anthropocentrism, right? That we're the only ones with consciousness. Consciousness pervades. You know, the biosphere is a living organism comprised of multiple levels of conscious living organisms.
I don't believe that trees have any kind of consciousness.
It's a different degree of consciousness and a different style. They actually communicate with one another when there's danger, and they share it. But you've got to read the scientific studies. It's amazing.
Two bodies communicating by Newton's law.
The trees can differentiate which saplings are their own, give their own a privileged treatment, but not neglect the others. There's a certain level of awareness there. That's amazing. It might not be as like ours, but it's something, and it has value. Sorry.
Can I just say something as
Thank
well?
you,
To
if I could.
I'm sorry, I really want to say it. Ants communicate through smell. Humans communicate through words and through gestures and through expressions, okay? Every creature has its own means of communication. So trees communicate through chemicals, okay? So we also have pheromones that do affect us. So we have many different means of interaction with nature, and in nature it has its own ways of interacting, and that is a kind of level of consciousness. And also animals have emotions, you know, like dogs and cats are like little children. You can see when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're upset, when they're angry. They have emotions. Fish, it's hard for us to read their emotions. Maybe a fish would. No, maybe some fish will be able to read the emotions of other fish, but I'm not very good at it. Mosquitoes, maybe they can get angry. A wasp definitely gets angry when you hit it.
Okay, if I may, I'd like to sort of interject something that might open up an opportunity for our panelists to say something from a Buddhist side, because the direction of my thought, whereas it does include the perspectives that were just voiced, I think more in terms of the paticca samuppada, the dependent co-arising. When we think about the value not as intrinsic or extrinsic, not in that way, but the unitary value of the organisms that inhabit our planet Earth, when we think about that unitary value, we begin to see a perspective where we can make a difference. That's the first thing. And I wonder if our venerable monk might have something to say about how the knocking down the binaries between animal and human, and between many other aspects of that kind of dualistic thinking, which does most to harm us, not only man against nature, but also to some extent, I am on the right side, you are not.
Yes, I guess paticca samuppada, dependent co-originations, co-arising, you can call it different names. But the whole idea is that we are the part and parcel of everything, because that particular animal we are referring to is only relevant because of your existence there. If you are not there, if there is a, let's say that here is a mosquito, and then mosquito is only relevant, we are here. But if we are not here, we are not coming to this room, the mosquito are here, it doesn't matter. So the whole idea is that our involvement, and that is a arising, that is a, when you started the first step, your entrance into that particular thing, and then snowball take off, whole idea. So by the value is, nature is nature, the dharma is a dharma. Is a sabhava dharma, which is called is dharma as it is. So, you know, sun rises in the morning from the east, it's always in the east. So nobody can change that. Nobody can argue on that fact. So that is a one ariser of the sun. It will create that with the heat, there is a life, one after another. So, you know, because of the sunrise, so we wake up, all animals wake up. It's a time for rising with the heat. You know, we said that we are lacking of a vitamin D. That's why we are getting COVID. So sometime it is good to, you know, sit on the sunshine, a very hot sunshine. It may kill the COVID. So it is a life force is going on one after another with the one actions. So that is what karma basically means. You see, karma doesn't mean that it is from the past karma. So once you started something, then it will snowball. But when it goes to the one certain extreme, then there's a problem. That's why you have to bring that whatever karma to the sufficiency, karma sufficiency. That is bringing back to the whole idea of the equilibrium, the balance. And that is all about the middle path. Yeah.
I had the question for a long time, so.
So one of the tropes that I've heard in this panel is this notion of sacrifice, that to be sensitive to and wanting to protect, preserve, conserve the larger environment, it involves some sort of sacrifice on the part of the individual or the community or civilization writ large. And I'm wondering if we might be able to change that trope, which is a negative connotation. It detracts that it requires for us as individuals or as collectives to give something up. And I'm wondering if we might be able to change the rhetoric to instead of using sacrifice as sort of the frame, instead use something like investment. That we get to make these decisions because we're investing in other priorities. We're investing in the welfare of the context of future generations to be able to also use this terrain that I am currently farming, or this mountain range that I get to currently enjoy, etc. So I'm investing in their future or in their opportunities by choosing to do X, Y, and Z instead of doing A, B, and C. So but just by changing our rhetoric from sacrifice to investment, something additive, something positive rather than negative and detractive, something that many of us subconsciously would rankle against.
I will use the word.
And one last, to simplify what I was just saying, many of us will look at our very busy schedules and say, oh, I have to go shopping. I have to get the kids to the doctors. I have to go to work. I have to write this paper. I have to. And we feel quite burdened by that kind of language. If we change that one verb from I have to I get to, then all of these things that need to be done become not burdens, but blessings, opportunities. And just by changing our rhetoric, might be able to change how we feel, our affective. I know, I'm trying to get rid of the guilt. I'm sorry. But instead of thinking about our commitments to protecting the environment in terms of we have to do X, Y, and Z, instead use the language of we get to do X, Y, and Z. We get to make choices that will conserve or preserve the natural world and our relationships with it. That might be able to engender or elicit greater coherence, adherence to pro-environmental, pro-sustainable kind of enterprises.
Again,
Just
can I-
quickly,
oh,
just
sorry.
for that, from Buddhist perspective, we will just use the word appreciation and gratefulness.
Yeah.
So once you have appreciation and gratefulness, it means that you are so mindful wherever you're consuming, you know that where is the limit, and then you should be appreciate. You should be thankful for what is having, what is going on for your own happiness, for your own well-being, but it costs something else as well. So you have to appreciate, and that you have to realize, and you have to be mindful.
I just want to echo that Christians are Eucharistic. A Eucharistic ethos, Eucharistia, is thanks. It's gratitude. It's an attitude of gratitude towards everything, and an attitude of gratitude towards nature and future generations and everything. So yeah, I want to echo that, and thank you for the rhetoric point.
I was going to give you an example that about I get to from I have to. I had to do quarantine when I go to Hong Kong. I mean, I've done 8 weeks. So at the beginning, it was really, really tough. And then my last quarantine, I was so happy because I realized that instead of saying I have to do quarantine, I was thinking I get to use 2 weeks of time to do the things that I never had a chance to do. Right. So I started to make a list before quarantine of things I wanted to do that I never had time to do, to read this book, to write this article, to do this painting. And then when I did that, the 2 weeks went by so fast. I didn't want to end the quarantine. I was like, I finished half the things that I had wanted to do. And it's like, oh, it's over so fast. So it was really, I think there's something to what you said is true. There's between having to and getting to. So
yeah, so talking about gratefulness, I think it's also about love. For the sake of the love of God, the love of future generations, for the love of nature and ecosystems, this is what I'm doing. So out of my love for it. And I also think of it as long-termism rather than short-termism. I've always thought that it's more beneficial for us to look for long-term happiness and long-term benefit rather than short-term benefit.
A question, do we finish at 3 o'clock or 3:30? It's okay, 3:30? Okay.
Father Tam, can you hear me?
Oh,
I'm Dennis Chang. I'm Dennis
oh,
Chang.
Dennis Chen from the,
That's
okay.
right, from Hong Kong. I
Yes.
seem to be that I'm the few people, just a few people left in Hong Kong watching.
Right.
But when you mentioned that you were in quarantine, I can tell you that I am at the moment is effectively in quarantine because of certain vulnerabilities. But I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
But I like this change of rhetoric in the sense that we use the word investment, and then, but investment, of course, there's a problem, because when you invest in anything, you expect a return, you see. So then you have another change of rhetoric, which is it's a gift. It's generosity, gratefulness, thankfulness. And so we changed the language from the language of rights to the language of unconditional gift. And once you see nature and everything else in terms of gift and the generosity of creation, then your response is different. Your response will be one of gratitude. Instead of investing for a return or conserving for future use, you're thinking of, well, you can use the word sacrifice, but even when you use the word giving, you're not really giving, you're just responding to the gift. And it may well be that the best way of responding to the gift is letting be. It's developing habits of presence on earth where you let others be. And letting be, that is really what we are. We're dwelling on earth, not to extract something from it, but you have at times to let things be. And that is, of course, part of the rhetoric, to change it from one of rights to one of conditional gifts. Thank you very much.
I think brother has something to say. Yes.
So sorry
And
to
then David.
introduce me. My name is Tenzin Doji and from the IPAC. So actually I want to say about the I have to and I get to. So this is from the Tibetan Buddhist point of view or Buddhist point of view. It's like to change your motivation, intention. For example, okay, let's say we are eating food, right? So if you are eating food, before we eat food in Buddhist, we always chanting something. So we are eating food not just for our beauty or something, just for our health. So another intention or motivation, we can think we are eating food because in our stomachs, there are many viruses, many so tiny virus there. So we are eating for those viruses. That's the one thing. Another thing, for example, if you're opening shop in your neighbor, so there's a two shop. So they always competition, right? So for example, when you go to shop, before you going shop, if you motivate, today I'm going to shop just not for my benefit, like an income, how much I can get a benefit. Okay, I'm going for shop or the open restaurant for those people who need to eat, those people who need to buy, surrounding your area, neighboring. So if you change that kind of thought system, everything when we say I have to, I get to, it's just our thinking system, because we need to change that kind of motivation thought. So if you change, I need to go shop or open restaurant, not for me, for those neighboring people who, when you open your shop, restaurant, those people don't need to go far, even the rainy system or very hot sun, so they can get near and buy. So indirectly, they also get a benefit. So if you think those benefit, then it's easy for you to do something. In Buddhist point of view, we say there's a Bodhisattva. So Bodhisattva is a Bodhicitta, altruistic mind. So this is some kind of altruistic mind or the compassionate mind. So just changing your thought, even the quarantine. So we say when it's quarantine, same thing. I'm just helping for someone else to the sick, to, you know, the, how to say, get my, stop transferring my virus to someone else. So just changing thought. I mean, it's also benefit this point of view.
Basically, point, David.
Can I make a short commentary?
Okay.
No, I think that's a beautiful thought, because, you know, getting back to the idea that we're a microcosm and we're also part of a larger anthropos, right? I won't speak too long, but it's the way we're framing, and whether it's, you know, a language of investment. Some people do like investment. Some people are about relationality, but the way in which we frame things, right? I think we can have both, not either and. And the idea of the gratitude, attitude of gratitude can always be operative in helping us frame that, depending on our value systems. But seeing us as anyway, I like that.
First, and then Paul.
I have a worry and then a question. So the worry that's been growing in my mind during the session and over the last couple of days is this. I keep imagining a lifeboat with a limited food supply full of a diverse group of religious scholars. And they are talking about, well, in my tradition, we conserve food for this reason or that reason. You know, it's altruistic or self-centered, or we find that the food has intrinsic value. Or, you know, they're having these discussions like this, or should we imagine conserving food as a sacrifice or an opportunity or a gift? Meanwhile, the food's disappearing, right? And so they still have to eat every day, and the food supply is going away, and people are starting to starve, right? So I don't think what we're doing is bad, because it is good to conserve the food. Maybe a lifeboat, you know, you'll get rescued the next day. So there's a reason to conserve the food. You should be talking about this. But on the other hand, it would be weird if what they didn't talk about was, what do we do about the fact that we're running out of food, that we don't know how to not eat food, right? So environmentally, conservation can help, right? But if all 8 billion of us became environmentalists overnight, we'd still have grievous loss over the next century, even if we all did our best all the time, right? So what I'm curious, I mean, species that are gone aren't coming back. We've crossed thresholds with greenhouse gases that are going to cause effects down the road, even if we stopped emitting today. So my question is, what do your traditions have to say about things like the inescapable the escapability of doing harm, the unavoidable, how do we live in a time when we can't help but harm? And like, how do we live with dwindling hopes, and those sorts of questions, like about the fact of environmental collapse, not just what we do in an ideal world to avoid it.
Can I answer?
Sure.
Yeah, because I, like you, need hope. So I invested quite a lot of my time and my life to find solutions to deforestation and destruction of ecosystems. And to my mind, we are not always going to be seeing dwindling of resources. If now I can see a lot of movements in the world actively regenerating ecosystems, actually regenerating landscapes, not just little patches of ecosystems, but joining them up into green corridors, into functional ecosystems that actually support all the wildlife. So obviously we will lose some species, but if we can regenerate ecosystems, regenerate landscapes with that in mind, creating the habitats or conserving the habitats that are needed to keep that ecosystem going, then I think we can have hope that those systems will not collapse and that they can be perpetuated into the future, and we will have food into the future. And the kind of other thing I've been studying is regenerative agriculture, where you design your agriculture based on an ecosystem, imitating it and working with it and finding out how the ecosystem works so that you can utilize it in the best way, you know, to help your pollination, to help your pest control. So you're not always attacking and fighting against the ecosystem to do your agriculture. It's a very intelligent way of designing it. So that for me gives me hope that we will have food in the future and we won't always be having dwindling resources. I know we have a limited planet, but I think our population will eventually kind of stabilize according to the planet's resources. That's I think will happen.
Yeah,
Oh,
just a very short answers. I actually, in order to think of how to manage those things, and then at the moment, the manage of the waste we are creating a lot is also another way of thinking. For example, do you think what is this cloth made of? This is made of the 6 plastic bottles, which is a 1 liter bottle, with people throw it away. So with the help of technology, this is my role. This is made of whole plastic waste. So this is one way of securing what is and how we are going to manage the future resources.
I want to jump in on that because I'm a huge advocate of regenerative agriculture. And your point is very well taken. However, there's a problem with your metaphor because it's not just about conservation. That's why I push back against protection. It's about totally rethinking all of our systems, which I mentioned in my comment to education. We have to redesign our economic system, our socio-political system, our farming systems. We cannot have monoculture. We have to reorganize the way in which chemicals are used. So that's big pharma and the chemical industry. We need a radical transfiguration of how we live. It's not just protection. It's not just recycling. It's not just reducing. It's not just conserving. We need to transfigure ourselves and our global society. And without such a transformation, we are doomed, right? You're right. So we do need to talk about the fact that doom is coming. I'm a little less hopeful than my colleague here. But we need massive systemic changes in order to secure, yes, not just preservation, but the way in which we engage the planet. We need to learn from the planet, right? Grow our food differently. We need to try to restore ecosystems. We need to create a zero waste society. We can learn from nature that there is no waste in nature because one species waste is another species food source, right? So how can we create waste that is either biodegradable or a benefit? And what we can learn and imitate from nature, right, is symbiosis's role in evolution. It went from eukaryotic cells, eukaryotic, sorry, I'm going to use the Greek pronunciation. Eukaryotic cells, right, were a parasite, right? It came from a parasitic relationship. It's the basis of all life, plant life, fungal life, animal life. And it evolved to a state of mutualism through commensalism, which is a neutral state. We need to find a way in which we can imitate a symbiotic relationship with each other and with the planet. We need to be able to read the book of nature and learn from it, or listen to the wisdom of Mother Earth. So it's not just about conservation. We have to change our mindsets and how we do business, how we operate. So you're right. If we're just thinking about ourselves on spaceship Earth with a limited supply of resources, then we're doomed, right? We need to change it.
So just to be clear, you're all just rejecting my premise, right? Because I was asking, like, what do your religious traditions say about the fact that for many people in the world, it is hopeless, in the sense that, like, people are like, no matter what we do, is my premise, people are going to die, species are going to be lost, ecosystems are going to degrade, the climate is going to change, oceans are going to rise, and you're all just flatly just rejecting that and saying,
well, I'm not rejecting that doomsday things are going to happen, right? But it's not just about conservation, right? We do need to change the way we're living.
No, I'm not asking about conservation. I'm asking about what religions have to say to people who are dying and about what to do in hopeless situations. I'm not asking about conservation. I'm not saying, how do we protect the food? The premise is the food is going away. And I'm just curious if any of our religions have anything to say to hopeless people. And I'm not saying here's hope, we can recycle. I'm saying, what do you say when the actual fact is that there isn't hope?
Can I say from the Islamic point of view that?
Okay, yeah. We have to wrap up a little bit.
Okay. Well, I would very quickly say.
It's a hopeful ending.
Well, what we learn from Islam is that this whole existence, this planetary existence, is temporary. It's all temporary. Everything is finite. Everything is limited in this world, and our life is always. We're always going to end. We're all going to die. The planet will end at some point, but the whole point of life is that we are being tested to see how we treat everything around us and the people around us. for God to judge us, and then our souls will be living eternally according to how we lived in this life. So we will be judged on what we did in this life, and our akhirah, our afterlife, or the destiny of our soul will depend upon what we've done and the decisions we made. So we do live on. Even if the whole universe collapses, there's another spiritual reality that we will continue to live in.
Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Basically, maybe to end this, I'd like you to think about one word or one sentence that is the most hopeful or specific contribution or insight of the tradition to the current crisis in the environment. How can you contribute to this discussion and or this solution, whatever? Just one word or one sentence about how your tradition can contribute specifically to or insight to this environmental ethical dilemma.
Okay, I just want to bring out the Buddha's own word here, which I translate. The nature protects the one who lives by the natural laws, and the nature will protect it. Nature well protected brings happiness.
Okay, good.
Dhammo have rakati dhammachari. That's a Pali word.
Okay, Christianity.
Just one word?
One word, one sentence.
Okay. The transfiguration.
Okay, great. Yes, Islam.
The best contribution, the best contribution that I think Islam can give to the world in terms of looking after the environment is to have a just economic system which limits the powers of corporations and banks. This is what will solve a lot of the problems. So,
thank you.
Instrumental reason.
Okay,
Intergenerational justice.
great. Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting panels, and thank you for all the panelists